As the temps start rising, I feel the familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I don't want to waste money on pieces I'll only wear once or for just one season. Thankfully, Quince changes that. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and far more elevated than anything else at this price. It finally feels like my wardrobe matches my standards. The best part is that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes, so you get to look good while feeling good. I'm pretty excited that I have upgraded my athleisure wardrobe for this summer. I bought a sweatshirt and a pair of wide-leg flow pants that are two of the softest items I own, and I plan to live in them. So join me in giving your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC. We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, and author of Act for Burnout, Act Daily Journal, and the Act Daily Card Deck.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
I'm Yael Schoenbrunn, a clinical psychologist, faculty at Brown University, author of Work, Parent Thrive, and a biweekly newsletter on relationships.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and author of an upcoming book on being a better conversationalist and making friends.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off The Clock.
Welcome to a very special episode of Psychologists Off the Clock. This is our 400th episode, and we wanted to invite all of our listeners behind the scenes with us. And as a part of this special episode, we have a very special guest, which is our production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams, who is very much always behind the scenes with us and is the magic behind the scenes.
It's hard to believe that we've done 400 episodes, but we have, and we're very excited. And in addition to the listener questions that we have for today, we thought it would be fun to just do a little behind the scenes, some of the things that go on, getting the episodes ready and that type of thing. Let's start with the big picture question for all the co-hosts, which is about why we do the podcast.
I do it to make friends. It's like my social drive to be on this team and to meet the people who I'm fangirling out about because I'm such a book nerd. And this is something that I recommend to so many people is if you're passionate about something, one of the best ways to meet other people who are passionate about it is A, to do a book club, or B, to do a podcast, because you will meet all the people that are super into the same thing that you're into. And it really does engender friendships for life. The 5 of us are super tight, but also I've met so many people through doing interviews that I've maintained and built friendships with over years. And it's just been amazing. So it's fun. You get to talk about things that you're really gaga about. And then you also get to meet cool people.
Why do you do the podcast, Jill?
Well, to be honest, when I first started doing it, it was because I had a book coming out and the publisher was like, you should do a podcast. And I reached out to you guys to ask if I should do a podcast. But what it's really become about since that time, because that was years ago now at this point, is for me, everything I do outside of therapy, I do because I recognize that not everyone has the resources or desire to be in individual psychotherapy. And yet we have access to all these incredible science-backed, powerful skills and tools, et cetera. And so for me, the books I write, being on the podcast, all of my public speaking, everything I do is really about getting this stuff out into the world in formats that are more accessible to more people. What about you, Emily?
So I think I'm similar to both Yael and Jill. I love the social aspect. And as a therapist in private practice and a writer, it's very lonely. I don't have a work team that I'm used to having in my past jobs. So it was really appealing to be invited. And I know I already shared that story, so I won't repeat it, but it was this funny thing where I was fantasizing about being one of the co-hosts and wondering if I was good enough, pulling in the imposterism of Jill's work. And then when you actually asked me before I asked you, I was completely shocked and so excited. So personally, I get a lot out of the social part and meeting the guests, and I love reading books anyways. And so to actually be able to read and then talk to the author about it is like a dream come true. But also in line with what Jill was saying, I'm really, as a content creator myself, I'm very sensitive to what is being distributed in our current media landscape and how there's a sense of responsibility to get good information out in the world, and to be part of a platform that's so ethical and responsible makes me feel like I'm doing my part. How about you, Michael?
Oh, I have very little to add to all of that. So I see myself as a bibliophile, and the idea that I get to read a book that interests me and then have a conversation with the author, and then maybe even a book club afterwards, so I can talk with other people who read the same book. That the idea is just mind blowing. I mean, imagine someone were to come to you and say, "Hey, Yael, so you can watch like the Marvel movie before everyone else, and then you get to hang out with the actors and have some fun." I would be like, "No, I mean that's fine. That sounds like fun, but do we have books as well? Can I have a book about that?" That is much more tempting. I just love books, and being in that connection, in that community is just, it's amazing.
We're outing ourselves as real nerds here.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I'm a big nerd.
I don't think anybody was not aware
Was
of
wondering. Yeah.
You aren't fooling anyone into thinking we're cool?
that. Jill's like, nobody knew.
Yeah, for me, so I've been here from the beginning. I mean, I've been doing this for over 8 years, and
You're an old nerd.
I know, and it seems like a long time. And sometimes I do think, am I ready to stop? Because it's a lot of work, and I do get tired sometimes. Not so much of the interviews themselves, but of all the work behind the scenes, But I think the things that keep me going, one is that learning piece, just like you guys. So I bring the stuff from the podcast into my therapy sessions, into my own life. I love the vitality of talking to people and recording the episodes. It's still fun to me. But then also, I, like a lot of you, I think of this as one of the public service things that I do, because we do bring in my opinion, nuanced and high quality conversations. And it feels like something that I'm giving to the world. So it's almost, to me, it almost feels like my pro bono work that I'm contributing. Yeah. So that keeps me going. It's values aligned in those ways.
Yeah. I'll just add that there's a lot of good podcasts out there, but there's very few that focus on evidence-based topics in psychology. And that is something that is hard to access because most people who are outside of psychology or outside of academia don't know sort of what is, evidence-backed, because somebody might say, I know this to be true, or this is trademarked, and it sounds kind of, proven, but a lot of what's out there is not actually content that's been tested in randomized trials and peer-reviewed journals. And most of what we do is really aligned with that. And so this is a place where we can actually disseminate really high quality evidence-backed ideas and practices from the science of psychology.
It's countering pseudoscience, which we actually have at least one episode on.
So people might be wondering, Debbie, you just said you consider this your pro bono work. And I'm betting there are some listeners out there going, wait, what do you mean pro bono? You guys have sponsors. Aren't you making like the big bucks on your podcast? So why don't we open up the curtain a little bit there? Does somebody want to talk a little bit about money and sponsorship?
Well, I can start us off by saying that a lot of people in my personal life are shocked when I tell them that we don't really make much money personally. Every once in a while, we have a little money left over and we can give ourselves a small bonus, but it's small. And I think people assume, because we actually get quite a few downloads. I mean, at some point, we were getting nearly 1 million downloads a year. And I think the industry has changed a little bit in the way they do downloads.
You can look up how popular a podcast is on a website called listennotes.com. So when you go to listennotes.com, you can look up any podcast. Only the ones in the top 10% will show up. And so ours is in the top 0.5% globally in terms of the numbers that we get.
And, it's expensive to run a podcast. So we have a lot of expenses for software. We have our wonderful podcast production manager who helps us do the editing and the show notes and the social media, and we pay her to do that. And so at the end of the day, I think unless you're one of those mega celebrity podcasts, most people in the podcasting industry are not making a lot of money. And that includes us who are amateurs over here as podcasters.
Yeah, early on, the podcast cost us money. We actually paid out of pocket for our equipment and our software and our Zoom account and everything else. There's a lot of expenses. And then once we got our sponsors, that covered all of our expenses, allowed us to hire Jay, our podcast manager, who's going to be joining us later in the episode today. So you'll get to hear from her. And like Debbie said, now we have a teeny tiny bit left over at the end of the year that we pay ourselves a small bonus. But it is, if you want to start a podcast because you think you're going to make $1 billion, that's probably
let us
not
know how
a
you
good
did
reason.
it.
Yeah.
We want to know.
But along those lines, something that I didn't realize, but is important to support as a non-celebrity, non-multimillionaire podcast, is to actually listen to the ads, as painful as it is. And I think we're going to talk about an alternative to that. But I just want to say, if you can tolerate those 30 seconds, 60 seconds, it actually really does directly help us.
So we have some dynamic ads that are just inserted into our podcast. And then we also have some host-read ads, which I'm sure you've heard. And those we do try very hard to only allow values-aligned ads to be aired on our podcast. So we take a look at them before we agree. And there are many highly paying sponsors out there that we have not accepted because we feel that they are not values-aligned.
And in fact, we had a listener who reached out to us that they were disappointed that they heard an ad for a company that they were surprised we would support. And it turned out it was a company we had said no to. And there was a weird glitch that happened behind the scenes that allowed this to slip through. So it was so great that this listener let us know, because otherwise we would have had no idea, because different ads play for different people in different geographical regions, the ones that aren't host read. And so that was actually really helpful. And we reached out to the people who manage our sponsorships right away and said, what happened? This never should have been on our podcast. And sure enough, it was a mistake they had made and they took care of it right away. So thank you, listener.
And now, of course, another great way of supporting us is through Patreon. So for those of you that don't know what Patreon is, it's a platform where you can support independent media producers like podcasts and so on with a small monthly fee that you choose. And some of you have already done that. And for all of you that did that, thank you. Thank you so much. We will do a little bit of a thank you addendum to the end of this episode. We'll run our Patreon supporters in the end credits of this episode. And for those of you that have asked us about ways to listen to the show without the ads, we had a survey at the end of last year where many of you said, hey, is there any way like we could get rid of the ads? Is there any way we could do that? And drum roll, now there is, because on Patreon, we now have a premium ad-free feed for our podcast listeners, where everyone that on Patreon signs up at the $5 per month tier now gets access to all the episodes without ads, to the entire 400 episode backlog of our podcast without ads. There's a little bit of, a tricky thing in there. Like the older episodes might still carry some of the old ads from back in the day. That's just how it works. But going forward, like you will get all the episodes without any ads. Those of you who are Patreon supporters and already support us at the $5 tier, we will automatically switch you over to the ad-free premium podcast feed. And if you go to our website, you'll find the step-by-step process in the books and offers page of our website. You'll see how that works there. And apart from the ad-free experience of the podcast, you will also be beholden to our eternal gratitude from all of us in the team.
Hey, listeners, it's Jill.
And Emily here, and we have an exciting announcement to share.
You know, all of us at POTC are passionate about sharing science-backed ideas from psychology to help people thrive. And one way Emily and I especially love doing this is through public speaking.
That's right. Whether it's keynotes, webinars, or workshops, we use the art of engaging storytelling, combined with our years of experience as psychologists, to provide organizations with transformative experiences that are based in the latest science, but translate to everyday skills for flourishing in your parenting, work, and health.
Or as we like to say, we bring the sizzle and the science. Because evidence-based talks don't have to be boring, and interesting talks shouldn't be fluffy.
So to that end, we created the Well-Being Speakers Collective with our former podcast guest and author of The Power of Saying No, Vanessa Patrick.
So if you or your organization are looking to provide compelling personal and professional development, visit our website at www.thewellbeingspeakers.com to learn all about who we are and the topics we cover.
Things like how to parent smarter, not harder, imposter syndrome, saying no, and more. We would love to connect and help you thrive. So visit us at thewellbeingspeakers.com today.
Why don't we talk about something fun, which is bloopers? You know, like I said, you'll hear from Jadine later in the episode. And so we have this incredible podcast manager that edits and makes us sound perfect and amazing. But really, there's a lot of less than perfect and amazing that goes on behind the scenes. So do you guys each want to share an experience you've had where like things went terribly, horribly wrong?
I'll start because I had one recently. And if I think back over the 8 years I've been doing this, a lot has gone wrong. But this one was recent because if you listen closely to the podcast, you'll recall I lost my voice around in December. And I had scheduled Charles Duhigg, who is, you know, kind of a big shot,
Big
so
deal.
to speak, in the world. And a couple of you in our team meeting said, hey, maybe you should reschedule with him. But I decided my voice is good enough and I don't want to reschedule with him. I'm going to go for it. So I log on. I'm squeaking by with my horrible voice, but like our connection just was kind of glitchy. And I felt so bad, but he was so nice. He rescheduled with me. And it was just a comedy of errors between my voice and our glitchy connection. And then the next time we recorded, which is the one that we ended up, you know, releasing because I did not want to ask him to reschedule again, but he got a text halfway through that he had to run and something to do with his kids. And so it was just kind of one thing after the next. And I thought, well, I'm very glad he came on. That was really nice of him. But there were just so many snafus. I thought, oh my goodness, we're lucky that this episode ever aired at all.
It's a great example, though, of like thinking on your feet about how to account for these kinds of things, because it was great content and it was a shorter episode. So you chose to do an intro that was a little longer than our normal intro to kind of create a more robust, you know, full hour episode.
And that was one thing that was a challenge about it, is that I had this whole list of questions. And because he had to go kind of unexpectedly, we had to cut it short. And I was left scrambling a little bit to try to figure out how to kind of bring it to a close when a lot of the content I had hoped to ask him about, we just didn't even get to. And so, you know, that's a bummer when that happens, but it happens.
You roll with it.
Exactly.
So much can be done in the editing room, but I had this one experience of an interview that I did actually with Lindsay Gibson, who's now become a good friend. Thanks, podcast. She's the author of Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, and she's absolutely delightful. But I had like a super busy day, and I got on the recording with her, and I hadn't eaten. My stomach was growling so loudly, and you can edit it out when you're not the one speaking. But Michael, I think you said, because you listened and gave feedback, that it sounded like there was a baby panther in the background just growling the whole time. So that's still in there if you want to go back and listen to that episode. But it was kind of a blooper that wasn't able to be edited out. And now I try hard to eat before episodes because otherwise my stomach wants to participate as its own voice.
You always have these animals featured in your podcast episodes. I also remember when you came on to talk about your own book, Work, Parent, Thrive, I was listening to the episode and there was snoring in the background. And I asked you all, is there someone fell asleep during the interview? And it turned out to be Jill's dog.
Yeah. They found my book very boring.
Yeah. I was doing telehealth with a client once, and she went, "Is there someone asleep in the room with you?" She got like really upset because it sounded like there was a grown man like in a bed next to me. I'm like, no, it's just my dog. And I showed her on the camera that it was just my dog. I'm like, I would never do that.
Yeah, sure. That's just my husband sleeping over here in the corner. You don't mind.
He's asleep. He's not listening.
So private.
Yeah. Actually, our episode with Robin Walser, she has French bulldogs too, like me. And every time we interview her, you can hear her Frenchie snoring in the background too. So those are Robin's dogs.
Oh, always. Because we met each other through the VA, and she was running this training program, and everyone knows Robin's dogs will always be snoring in the background of every national meeting.
I would say mine is probably, a lot of them are technical difficulties. And it was when I interviewed Vanessa Patrick about her book, The Power of Saying No, and we did the entire interview. And then when I went to listen, edit, whatever, it was just garbled mess. Like I couldn't tell that it's not like I forgot to hit record. There was just something wrong and there was no way to fix it. The only thing we could do was redo the whole entire interview. And I felt so terrible because you're asking someone to take their precious time to devote to this interview and to have to ask her to do it again. But I will say we both agreed our second interview was even better than our first. And, I was saying, unlike Yael, I don't tend to make long-lasting friendships with my guests, but Vanessa is an exception to that. And I think it is precisely because we had this experience and she was so gracious and understanding. And now, we remain closely connected since that happened.
I had something similar like this happening with David Robson on The Laws of Connection, where we had this amazing interview. We connected. We had jokes. We almost finished each other's sentences. And then we're done. And I'm like, thank you so much for being on the show, David. Let me just hit stop. And I look up at the corner of the window, and where it said stop recording, it said start recording. And my face went as pale as the wall behind me. And I looked at him, I said, didn't you see, you saw that it counted down from 3 when we started talking, right? He was, yes, it did. So I have no idea what went wrong. But ever since that day, I am absolutely paranoid about forgetting to hit record. So the moment the guest is in the room, I'm like, first thing before I say hello, I'm hitting that button.
Sounds like you've developed a bit of a safety behavior, Michael.
Well, it also gives us a lot of bloopers because a lot of the fun stuff happens before the interview starts. So I'm the one recording that.
And he was very kind and willing. He agreed to meet with you again.
We recorded
do his
1 or 2
always so
weeks
kind when they're willing.
later. Yeah. It was a bummer because the jokes wouldn't land anymore because we were both thinking, like, do I drop the same line again now that kind of everyone knows where it's going? And then we didn't. So the interview was still brilliant. And it was still like, he was really kind about it. The first thing he said when he saw me almost pass out was, dude, like, no problem. We can re-record this. Yeah, that was my biggest faux pas.
Well, I live in fear of this happening. And so I have my safety behaviors well oiled. And so I haven't had that happen, knock on wood. I did have once where I downloaded it. And when I went into our software Descript and played it, it only had the guest's voice. And so it would have the guest talking and then silence and then the guest talking. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's finally happened. Something went wrong. But I just X'd out of Descript, opened it again and redid it, and it worked. But it was a close call. I did have one guest who I will not out. They were very kind about it, but they were calling me Debbie, and I had to.
I didn't know about this. I had to gently say, "I'm Emily, not the great Debbie."
We also have some really fun bloopers that aren't just like horrific technical difficulties, but like, I don't know, there was a time Debbie and I were doing an intro and did I snort or something? And we both like burst out laughing. And so, we have a couple of those that are fun that we're like, oh, save for the blooper reel.
Yeah. I mean, every once in a while, for those of you veteran listeners that stay until the very last second, you might every once in a while be surprised by a blooper that we air. Like when Emily explained to us that her dogs are, she prevents her dogs from barking by putting up a sign And we were all like, what do you do? Like, you write down, please don't bark? And she's like, no, it's for the neighbors so they don't ring the doorbell. And those things then end up at the end of the episode, which is hilarious when you listen to them yourself when they air like weeks later and the bloopers just hit you as a surprise.
So should we switch gears and do some listener questions?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so we had a few listeners write in and ask questions, and they had several questions, and every single one of them had this same question, which is, how do you pick your guests? And then there was a follow-up to that. So how do you decide which guest to interview? And then if two hosts want to both interview the same person, how do you decide? Like, is there like a battle, tug of war, fist fight, duel? So who wants to take that one?
I can start us off with that one. Just to say, we get a lot of pitches, and we also sometimes just come across something we happen to be interested in. We initiate and reach out. We try to find topics that we personally are interested in, but also not repeat the same topics over and over again. And I think one thing I just want to say is that we are just a weekly podcast, but we get so many pitches that we sometimes have to decline people who would be excellent guests, but we just don't have the room, or we might have just covered a very similar topic recently, or it might be that it's just a topic none of us happen to be very interested in. So we try to kind of find a good balance there, and it's always a kind of just a fluid process.
Yeah, I love how you can look over the course of our 400 episodes and have a sense of what's going on in the hosts' lives, because like we have early episodes that Elle did about parenting like really small kids, and then it was like parenting teenagers, and now it's perimenopause.
Yeah.
You can basically see us aging over the course of the podcast based on the topics that we've covered. Have we ever had a case where we've both wanted to host the same person?
Yeah.
Debbie and I were like, yes. And it was a knockdown match. And then we both ended up doing it.
Sometimes a pitch comes through and a couple or several of us are interested in it. And I think we partly decide by who has an opening next, but Michael and I have had this a few times where, and actually I think a couple times I just grabbed one and was like, I'm doing, and then Michael said, well, I wanted to. Yeah. And actually I felt bad because I was like, oh, I should have given it to Michael because he wanted it.
I was going to say, too, though, that there was one time that Debbie and I both wanted to do one, and we ended up co-hosting it together, which was pretty fun. But we don't typically do that. That was the episode with Oliver Berkman. But I was going to make a joke that we take bribes, which we do not. There's
We don't?
Except for Michael. Michael takes bribes.
We have
highest bidder. No, but there's like no money that exchanges hands. It's really like it's a passion project, and I have gotten myself more deliberate about picking topics that are in the relationship sphere. And I think that we each have sort of our pet topics that are within our area of expertise, or just something that is particularly of interest to us. And I will say too that you'll notice that most of the topics are related to books that are coming out. But once in a while, I will read something from the library that is from like many years ago. And it's just so grabbing. Like the idea is so fascinating that I'll pursue it, even if it's not a new timely book. And I think that a lot of the topics that we cover are really evergreen. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. And we also try to make sure that there's science behind them. So when you were talking about the reasons that we might not accept a pitch, that's another thing that's in there. And sometimes even if it's like something that's really popular in psychology that we think like lots of listeners might like, if the science is like unclear, then we might go, let's wait. And if this gets more robust over time, maybe we'll do it. And it's not because we don't think the book or the guest wouldn't be like great or interesting. We really want to stick to that science-backed ideas in psychology.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of our pitches that we get are just a very clear no, because they're not aligned with our mission, and they would fit perfectly fine on other podcasts.
Yeah, like a blanket
to 1,000
pitch.
podcasts.
Yeah,
right. And it's pseudoscience, or it's very clear that they're really wanting to come on strictly to sell and promote something, which of course we have authors on. And part of what we want to do is help them with their book launch and help them promote their book. But that's very different from like some of these pitches that are just clearly so salesy, or it's like they have an app that they want to try to go out and sell on the podcast. Yeah. And those are pretty clear no's for us.
There's something interesting when it comes to finding guests that I think a lot of our listeners don't know about. And that is that when we go out and we look for guests, so these are not like pitches that are incoming, but we're actively going out looking for guests, then most authors will do their book tour and their heavy promotion before the book comes out. So that means that my tactic of going to the bookstore, looking for books that I like, will most likely mean that author is already done. So something that I do is I go into the upcoming book sections of Amazon or NetGalley, which is this nice app where publishers can pre-release them, and then looking through them there, because those are the authors that you can then reach out to and say, hey, by the way, I would like to interview you, and they're eager to do that with someone whose book has been out for half a year. They have new things that they're doing, especially if they're, big in the world of writing and they're just moving on to their next book and their deal with the publisher has run out, so they don't need to do media time anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. Try to strike while the iron's hot, that they'd be willing to donate their time. So similar to how we don't always accept every pitch, has there ever been a guest that we interviewed and didn't air their interview? This is the part of the episode we call scandals. POTC scandals.
We need like dramatic music here.
Dun, dun, dun.
So this is not something that has happened a lot on the podcast, because usually we're pretty selective, but it did happen once.
And most people are so lovely.
Yes.
Well, I think that's important. This is our 400th episode, and it has literally only ever happened one time. And so it had to have been a pretty significant issue to choose not to publish that episode. Do you want to talk about that, Debbie?
I'll just say that it was a person who's well known, who has a very famous book on trauma, and we don't want to name any names, but the person that was interviewed by Diana was not kind, and we just didn't feel comfortable airing it because of the way that the person presented themselves and also the way that they treated Diana.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can say he horribly mistreated Diana to the point of almost being abusive, and she wasn't sure whether she was being sensitive and had all of us listen to it. And there was zero question. At the time, it was just Yael, Debbie, and me. And all three of us listened to it and said, absolutely not, no way. And we knew that if we aired this person and their name, it would likely help grow the podcast and we'd get lots and lots of listens. And the three of us, it was just a resounding no. There is no way that our values would allow us to put this out in the world and give this person a platform when they're, mistreating one of our co-hosts so blatantly.
Which is another thing I think that we think about as we're choosing guests as well, is who do we want to give a platform to? And we try, sometimes we get some really big names on the podcast, but we also try to elevate voices that maybe we just want to support.
Well, and I'll say we have turned down big names because of what we know from press and insider track about behavior that we are not comfortable giving that person more voice and platform. And so we do take these things really seriously. Not that we always know, but if we do know something, that's not gossip. That's actually well-founded, that we take that very seriously.
Yes. And it is true that we don't always know, and we don't always spend a whole lot of time researching but there are some figures in our field that I think we're aware of some issues surrounding them, either as people or their work. And we try to, we try to be values aligned to the best of our ability. It's, it's not always perfect.
All right. You want to take a couple more listener questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's another kind of bunch of them that go into the same group, which is basically along the lines of like your favorite episode or favorite conversation, or what you've most integrated into your own life, right? Like what has changed you, or which guest or episode do you think back on the most often? So like what's been the most, I guess, impactful would be the way to kind of capture that.
Of episodes we've listened to or done?
I think either. It could be your own that you've been the interviewer, or it could be one that, one of us did that impacted you.
One of my favorites that was recorded before I returned to my seat as co-host was the roundtable that Emily led with Debbie. That was just incredible, I think, from a lot of different points of view. The topic of mental health and social media, I think, is such an important one. But as a social scientist, I thought it was such a wonderfully done episode because you really got to get a sense of like how people who are involved in science talk to one another and flesh through ideas that are really important in terms of like their applications in our everyday lives and how complicated it is, but also how science can be really misconstrued and miscommunicated to the public and what the impacts of that are. So for me, that was such a powerful episode. And the guests that you guys had on were just so impressive and so well spoken. And it was just like an episode that stuck with me.
Agree. Yeah.
That was probably one of my top experiences since joining was being part of that. And I just want to give a quick shout out to how masterfully Debbie facilitated it because it was so much content and so many voices. And it still remains today very imperative because of all the policy changes that are happening based on not great science.
I have to say, the opportunity to talk to these incredible experts, including you, Emily, it was really fun. So I'll tell about an episode that stuck with me because I would say multiple times a week, I think about a conversation I had with Michelle Seeger last year. She wrote The Joy Choice, and it's about sustainable exercise and kind of getting out of this all or nothing thinking about exercise so that we can just exercise more and keep it going over a lifetime. And even this morning, I walked one of my daughters to school. Not a big deal, probably, 20 minutes walking. And I was thinking about, okay, this is the kind of sustainable exercise. So it's just one of those little, mine is more of a day-to-day thing, but all the time I'm thinking, oh, I have a chance to just go take my dog for a quick walk, or I'm going to just stretch a little bit. And how her thinking around exercise really helped me.
I find this one hard to choose because there are so many things. But if I had to pick one that was clearly the most impactful and maybe the most enduring, it's got to be Eve Rodsky, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to you guys that I would say that.
Oh, Jill, I've sent that episode to so many people. Many people.
So Eve Rodsky's episode about fair play, and it's about gender equality in the home. And I say it to everyone. It literally saved my marriage. And this was years ago when I first interviewed her. And I just did a panel at a Galentine's Day event for a Chamber of Commerce. And one of the questions that people were asking was like, if you had to name one woman in your life who's had this big impact on you. And I think they meant, like your grandmother or your boss. And I was like, Eve Rodsky. I mean, so even all these years later, she doesn't even know. Do you know she's on my holiday card list? Like I literally stalked her and was like, can I have your address so I can put you on my holiday card list? Like I've never done that with any other guest. I'm like, I just love you so much and I need you to know. Because truly, it has really, my marriage is better than it's ever been. And that is 90% because of fair play.
I loved that episode too. Yeah, that one does stand out.
Wasn't she a 3-time guest?
Yeah, 3-time guest because it was Fair Play 1 and 2. And then she also came on to talk about our book, Find Your Unicorn Space. Yep.
Michael, how about you?
Yeah, dang. I thought I can weasel out of this one. I can't pinpoint a single episode. Everyone mentioned Emily's amazing roundtable. Which, by the way, a client talked to me about reading said book that you're discussing in this roundtable. And my immediate response was, wait, by the way, you need to listen to this episode. And I got a WhatsApp message a day later saying, wow, thank you so much for sending this through. This is so eye-opening. So I will tag on to that. And then I will say that for so many episodes, there's one sentence here and one thing there, and then there's something I incorporate daily because I heard it in an episode 100 episodes ago, which was maybe this one thing about autonomy, supportive parenting. I don't know. It's so many small things. It's Psychologists Off The Clock for me is taking a shoebox full of pink glitter and throwing it up in the air. And then you walk through your apartment whoa, there's one. And then years later, you still find glitter somewhere. This is the POTC experience for me.
Oh, I love that.
Well, that actually is a great segue. Why don't we do one last question to end on for listener questions? And it's kind of related to the glitter, Michael. If you could articulate what you hope in 20 years to look back on and say was the impact of this podcast in the podcast space or in psychology, what would you hope for?
Kudos to that question asker. What
Great, right?
Yeah.
Incredible question. Thank you for sending that. And very hard to answer.
my answer would be like very much in the science space, because I think most people, again, outside of academia, don't realize that psychology is a science, right? We just think it's like wellness and it's sort of soft. And, if you think it and it feels true, then it must be true or it probably works. And that isn't the case. Like, we can test a lot of these concepts and interventions and practices and see how well they work. And often our intuition is wrong. And so that's where science is so powerful. So we don't just need to take advice from people who say, well, this worked for me, it'll work for you. In fact, we probably shouldn't. We should actually be curious and ask the people who are offering up advice, what's the scientific backing? How has this been tested? And I hope that this podcast gives people both the sense that you can ask that question and that you should be looking for guidance that has a scientific backing, because that is the kind of advice that is more likely to work well for you.
Well said. And I think I would just tack on to that this one little thing, which is, and that what we did was to make that accessible.
Yes, you don't need to be an academic to know the science.
We are in an age of influencers, and there's a lot of mental health
and
influences out there, and misinformation and pseudoscience and conspiracy theories. But I really want to be remembered, years down the road as, that we weren't one of those, basically. One of the pseudoscience-y kind of, we're trying to be influencers, so we'll tell people whatever they want to hear without any concern for whether it's true or not. And, I want to be able to stand by this podcast at the end of the day. Will we get some details wrong that 5 years from now they'll know, we know that? Yeah, of course, that's how science
Well, the science
works.
will change, right? I mean, science is always evolving. So what's true in 20 years might be different from what we know now, but at least it will stand on its own in this moment in time.
Yes, that's my hope.
And I would want to see someone who, through this show, learned to distinguish from one from the other. Be able to say, like, well, this is evidence-based, and here are the reasons why I know it's evidence-based, and here's how I can call out the other thing. And it might or might not work. That's still fine. But I can tell as the observer of the social media video, whatever it is, that it's not science-based, and I'm going to see it through that lens. And that would be quite an achievement.
I picture it like being an anchor in the waters of trends and hype. And I would aspire for us to be that really solid, steady presence of information.
Love
with
that.
all of everything that's storming around us all the time.
Says the one who basically manifested her way into the podcast.
I did. The science of manifesting.
So now that we've talked about the internals of the podcast and our experience as the co-hosts, for this episode, we've done something very special. We brought in our podcast production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams, and we brought her in for this episode as well and asked her, because she is such an integral part of our team. And I think I don't only speak for myself when I say we just adore this person and the work she puts in. We're so happy to have her on the team. And we pushed her out of our comfort zone, as we do, and said, would you come on this episode with us and let us introduce you and answer some behind the scenes questions that are a little bit embarrassing or maybe not about the co-hosts? And can you tell us some funny stories about the things that are going on? So for the next part of this episode, let's open the curtain and bring in Jay.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's definitely strange to be in this seat because I'm normally the one editing it.
So also very interesting for me, being the host that is based in Europe. Jadine, you are based somewhere in my vicinity, actually. Where are you located at right now?
I'm in Italy, in Puglia, but I'm British, as you can probably tell.
Well, I'm thinking we need to have our retreat located in your region sometime, one of these days.
Do it.
That would be
amazing.
So I will throw some questions to you since we have you with us here. And the first question as a team, we would like to ask you is, what is it like to edit our podcast, and what's different in editing Psychologists Off The Clock from the other podcasts that you work on?
Well, first of all, it's always a learning experience. None of the other podcasts that I work on are psychology based. The topics you cover are all very different. You guys are all, you all bring something different to it. You've had me crying, laughing, some real aha moments. So yeah, I'm always learning. It's tricky sometimes to know what maybe you would want edited out or maybe what you would want kept in. In fact, Michael, I just saw your message. You were like, I made a joke. Put it back in.
And I was listening to the edit and I thought, this joke obviously didn't land for Jay because she edited it out.
I'm so sorry. I thought it was an honest fumble because you said something along the lines
How? So I will explain to the listeners because this episode is already aired. So this was in my episode with Alina Nicolaou on public speaking and TED Talks. And she asked me for my favorite fairy tale. And I said, Little Red Riding Hood. And he said, okay, let me walk through the fairy tale. And I said, wait. We might have children listening to the show. We don't want to spoiler the fairy tale. So listeners, if you have kids in the car, stop the car, put the kids out, and then return to the podcast. and Jay cut that out. And he was like, people, if you have kids in the car, stop the podcast. And that was the edit.
Well, we have a very international team here. So maybe this is where we have cultural miscommunications.
It's because he didn't kind of laugh afterwards. And I thought, maybe he genuinely accidentally said that. But that's an example of how sometimes it's not so clear. But Michael, you do have me laughing all the time. So always a learning experience, always fun. Obviously editing podcasts in general, it's quite time consuming, and you've got to have a good ear for it and just finding that good balance of efficiency, but also quality.
Jay, you're a lifesaver because editing is so time consuming and we did it ourselves for years. And I am just eternally grateful, Jay, for the work that you do. And also you really do make us sound better than we are, because I think I make a lot of mistakes and fumbles. And then when I listen, I'm always like, oh, I sound better than I thought. And I think that's in large part because of the magic of Jay. So thank you.
And I just want to throw in there too, that for people, because listeners don't know how this goes, so we give the raw footage to Jay. She does her beautiful job editing it. But then before it goes out, the co-host who did the interview re-listens and Michael re-listens, so that we catch, did she edit something out that we wanted in, or is there something still in that we wanted out? So, we do the interview, Jay edits it, we do a listen, we do any re-edits that we need to, and then it comes out to all of you listeners.
It's quite a process. It really is. And it's a team effort every single time.
I think what I admire most, Jay, is how you pick the pull quotes for social media, because I would not even know where to begin. And you do such a nice job of highlighting. It's a lot of content in these interviews. We pack in a lot, and you do such a great job of pulling out what's interesting.
Well, thank you. And that's another thing I will say, actually. I don't come from a psychology background. So, that's another thing, getting into the mind of the audience of what they want to hear, what they want to learn, what would give them value. But you guys will come back to me and say if there's a quote that you prefer, and that's absolutely fine. I'm happy for that direction. But I do really try to pull out the quotes that will, get the most impact and draw people in. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And it happens pretty rarely that we want to change it. Jay also picks out the very first audio snippet that you hear when you first start the podcast. And I remember when she first started, the thing we were talking about that we were the most impressed by is the fact that she doesn't have a psychology background, but just gets it. She writes our newsletter, everything she's done, the content, you're like, wow, you would never know that this isn't her background. She's just a real talent at what she does.
I was kind of nervous about handing the control over when we first brought Jay on board, because I thought, well, what if they don't know how to do that or something? And you do a beautiful job, Jay.
Oh,
what's the most difficult part of managing a podcast? And don't say the difficult personalities on the team, because
that is 100%.
We're all here.
I'd probably say the most difficult part, and I wouldn't even say it's difficult, is just writing from your perspective, the guest's perspective, making sure that I'm, in the show notes, or be it in a social media post, is making sure that I'm writing things that are factual. I know you guys are very much compassionate focused, but also science-based. So I try and mimic what you guys already do.
So on the podcasting front, I'm curious. I mean, it sounds like you really learn a lot from the episodes, but is there an episode or a lesson from one of the episodes that's really stuck with you?
I have learned a ton from your episodes, and you'll have to forgive me because I can't remember the titles or the numbers off the top of my head. But I think from relationships to parenting to making connections, I'm pretty much covered. There was an episode the other day about communicating with your partner or any relationship. And it was when you come into a conversation, making it clear what you want to get from that conversation. What are your expectations? Are you wanting to understand something? There was a menopause episode. Yeah, learned a ton on that episode. I mean, I didn't realize that perimenopause can start when you're in your 30s. There's over 100 symptoms. So that was wild for me.
Can I throw something in here just as a quick insight? When this menopause episode aired, I liked it on social media. Ever since that day, I'm getting menopause ads on Instagram. Well, we are incredibly lucky to have you, Jay. And if anyone out there is thinking, why don't I have a podcast production manager like Jay?
You can't have her. No, you can't have her.
Yeah, you have to share. What did we tell you about sharing? No.
We obviously need to do an episode on sharing.
I've avoided it.
If you need a podcast production manager, we cannot recommend anyone any more than our very own Jay. And while Yael is not going to like this a lot, we are more than happy to share her as well. So if you need any support with your podcast, she gets 6 out of 5 stars from all of us. And if you want to get in touch with her, get in touch with us and we will forward her contact information to you.
Actually, we can have Jay put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Jay, were there any bloopers that you remember from doing editing? Do any come to mind?
Definitely one that comes to mind, Michael. I think you were talking about where Debbie went to university and you referenced it as Hogwarts.
Yes.
I never forget that.
Instead of Harvard, he said Hogwarts, and we laughed so hard. That was pretty funny.
Hogwarts would probably be a lot more fun than Harvard. Thank you for joining us. So fun.
Now you know what that's like. Thank you, Jay.
I hope I did it justice. And yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for all you do. And the brilliant podcast.
For all you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Well, guys, I think this is it. We've sort of come to the end of our 400th episode. Woohoo! Big celebration. So we will sign off here, but stay tuned to listen to our thank you to our amazing Patreon subscribers.
Thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jolan.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you to Katrina.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you to Andrea.
Thank you, Dina.
Thank you, Nathan and Amala.
Thank you, Maria.
And thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you so much to all of those who have been supporting us, even with listening to ads. And so now, if any of you want to join the ranks of our Patreon subscribers and not have to listen to ads, we would so appreciate it and love to have you.
And thanks, everybody, for listening and for joining us on this 400th episode.
Thanks for listening every week.
Yeah, you're the best ever.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review or contributing on Patreon.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our newsletter and connecting with us on social media.
We'd like to thank our podcast production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.